Hello and welcome to this new Leadership Insights from the Møller Institute. I'm Richard Hill. I'm an Associate and Client Director at the Møller, and today we have been joined by Adam Billing, who is obviously an Associate at the Møller, our resident guru when it comes to sort of thinking about ideas and innovating new things, but also is the founder of Treehouse Innovation, and which is the home of Sprintbase, which is a fantastic platform for thinking about new ideas and solving problems. So Adam, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Richard, everybody, very, very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So now, as with all of these conversations, we've got some questions to kind of get the conversation flowing. And the first one that we've always been talking about is, because Møller Institute is obviously leadership-based place for learning and development, what would you say is one of the most important leadership traits that people need to exhibit today?
So it's a great question. And I think the need to exhibit today part is especially relevant, because I think depending on the time and the context, those kind of most critical attributes, will tend to change, not surprisingly. And if we look at what we're seeing now and what we're hearing from a lot of the organizations that we work with, it's, more than ever, there's, these kind of unpredictable problems showing up, this sort of kind of never before seen challenges coming down the pike. And it's really that kind of critical organizational capability to be able to respond to those things with genuinely new solutions, because these are new problems in many ways happening in very new conditions. And I think when that becomes the real objective, that newness, that dealing with the unpredictable, then the kind of leadership styles that really come to bear will change. And I think for this environment, and there's great questions that you guys are posing here. I've given some thought, and what's come down to is the notion of air cover. So a great leader being able to provide air cover for their people. And just a quick word about what the heck I mean by that. I'm thinking of air cover as kind of creating a safe space for the people in their organization to tackle some of these sort of unexpected new types of challenges in a way that is different from the way they're used to working, using some different tools, being a bit more experimental, and most importantly, being open to that ever necessary and critical part of experimentation and innovation, which is failing, learning through failure, through trial and error, and making that something that people can do without running the risk of the kind of adverse effects of maybe not hitting that home run right out of the gate. So that's what I mean by air cover. So making it safe for people to take some risks and experiment.
Yeah, now, I guess you've worked with a huge number of organizations, big and small, global corporates that everyone will recognize, through smaller startups and sort of mold breakers. Are we, generally speaking, are we any good at letting people fail? I mean, or do you see, are we better maybe in the more agile, smaller organizations and really hard in the corporates? Or have you ever been surprised by where you've seen failure allowed to happen?
That's a great question. And yeah, there aren't, at least from my experience, it's not possible really to say by size or by industry. I mean, there's some kind of broad strokes you can take, but what I've seen, it differs more from leader to leader, and that's often shaped by culture within an organization. Those transcend size and sector. But I think if we bring it down to that individual leader type, I mean, you go into almost any organization, you can pretty quickly find who that person is, because everybody wants to be on their team. They all want to. I mean, there's a fellow at Sky. A fellow at Sky, his name's Lucien Bowater, and he is he's just a fantastic innovation leader, and he's very consistent with his messaging to his team, which is, we're going to equip you with some new tools, and we're going to give you permission to use them. And if this doesn't make a little bit of a mess, then you're probably not doing it right. And I think it's that keeping that balance between, we want people to take risks, but we want those to be responsible risks. But but making sure people know that if they do go out on a limb, and what they end up coming back with is just a really great learning that's going to save a lot of time and money, ultimately, because they failed pretty quick and cheaply, but that's still really good, and it's not going to have an adverse effect on their careers, be a black mark on their CV, right? And yeah, so I think it's those idiosyncratic leaders who are just naturally good at this and kind of create that environment around them that just really allows people to flourish.
Yeah, and I guess actually that probably makes the leadership job easier. You mentioned if people want to flock to you and work with you and be in your team, then that means that you've got the tools and the capacity around you, which are energized by your by this space, and it gives you a chance to make certain that you as a leader can do a better job, because you're not caught up with the risk, you're not caught up with fear yourself, and translating it down to everyone else makes certain that the challenge is in a way lesser for you. If you can make everyone else feel comfortable, then you don't have to do all that maintenance to a certain degree.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth in that, and I certainly won't be the first to say that great leaders, especially when we're talking about innovation and needing to come up with new concepts that are going to make an impact. It's not the leader's job to own all of those ideas, to be the source of all of those ideas. I think it's great leaders. It's all about bringing out that capability within your teams and your people. So yeah, in a way, I think it is. If you can really inhabit that mindset of like, my purpose is to create this space for others. Yeah, in a way, it is. It's putting the onus there really where it belongs, and in a way, yeah, kind of making it clear what your job as the leader really is, and really doesn't necessarily have to be.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So as a leader of a creative practice, as a leader of an organization that helps people have ideas, are you suggesting that maybe creativity isn't something the leader has, that's dispersed amongst everyone else?
Well, I mean, it's we're talking about a leadership attribute that's critical now, right? And by saying this air cover concept of making it safe for people to go out and experiment without having to worry about the consequences if they don't nail it right away. It's not to say that the leader doesn't need to be creative or shouldn't be creative, but I think it's to say that that shouldn't be the attribute that defines their leadership style, is probably the best way to put it. When you work with a leader who really identifies primarily as the creator, then you start to see, this is stereotypes here, so it's all very broad strokes, but you often see different behaviors coming out. So it's more about leading with solutions that originate with the leader and seeking validation from the team to go, yep, you see, I got it, which is very, very different than sort of pointing the direction, saying, here's the challenge, go get it and bring it back to me. So I'd say, like, right now, it's probably more important to be able to tap into the broader creativity of a larger number than to focus on the individual creativity of a given leader. So, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's making that shift from kind of the archetype of leader, someone who has a vision, who aligns people and then gets moving into action. It's the vision, particularly now in 21st century leadership and the sort of changeable environment. Their idea, their vision isn't so important. It's about being able to get the vision of those around them to flower and turn into something that they can coalesce around.
Yeah, I think that but I think there's something really important too about sort of setting the challenge and setting the right challenge, and also equipping them with the right tools and mindsets to address it. I think one of the important jobs of a leader right now, I think, is not to sort of step back and go, okay, guys, who has ideas? And I don't know if that's really it. I think it's more of a job of saying, okay, how might we deal with a certain disruptive technology, or how might we create new opportunities where we're seeing a really sudden change in our customers' preferences or lifestyles or whatever it might be. And then being able to, after they've sort of kind of mapped out where that opportunity space is, I think it's that point when they step back and then let the teams sort of come in and then, fill that with those potential solutions.
So it's all about the parameters.
Direction. Say that again, sorry?
So it's all about the parameters. It's you define the space, you give them the box to work in, but you give freedom within that box to then act.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's sort of, pointing someone in the right direction and then helping them on their way. Yeah.
Now, you started off in saying about how changeable the world is at the moment, and obviously, we look around us and we can see that things are rapidly changing, rapidly altering, and we're entering a kind of shift in our environment that we've never seen before. Now, VUCA, the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, as a concept, is something that's had a lot of traction in the last kind of 10, 15 years in terms of, from the financial crash onwards. But there's always also that argument that the world has always changed. What are your thoughts on that? Every generation has sort of faced their moment and kind of go, this is different to my parents' generation. This is different to what I was expecting to come into. Is it worse now, more challenging now, or is it just a relative perspective?
Well, it's a great question. It's really hard to say. I do think there are a few objective measures that have changed. I mean, one of that comes down to just the exponential pace in which technology develops. So that is something that is having a tangible impact. That's what's enabling that acceleration, right? So, we work with a lot of different sectors and we hear it all the time across sectors, right? Whether it's in media or work with some great in gaming, all the way to law, insurance, all across the board. And what we always hear is that new entrants show up out of nowhere more quickly than they've ever been able to before, because there might be some new enabling technology that allows them to very quickly, master one part, maybe even just one small part of what that kind of established organization does. And because that tech is moving so quickly, these new disruptive entrants are a lot harder to spot, a lot harder to see coming, and it really changes the role of the established organization in terms of how to respond to it. So I think technology as an accelerator has been, that's been an objectively different kind of scale than we've had to deal with in the past.
And now we're kind of all dependent on technology for working to a certain degree. With remote working, with people kind of a lot more dispersed than we ever expected. How can, aside from accelerating the disruption, have you found that that technology as a tool is something that in your work and the work you do with organizations has actually been something you can really harness and give a sort of greater foundation for the sort of managing and leading the change?
Yeah, it's the last few months, I think for everybody, have been, besides being utterly surreal, I think there's been a lot of, from a lot of people, a lot of colleagues, partners, just, that this period is kind of opened up their eyes to some other possibilities about how technology could and maybe should work as part of our daily life. And I think a lot of the things, they haven't been, I don't think COVID has been sort of a driver of change in its own right. It's been an accelerator, as you say. It's just moved us along a sort of pre-existing trajectory a bit more quickly than we were expecting to go. So I think some of the things we're seeing around remote working, I think we are very likely, when this sort of returns to normal, I think we're going to see a lot more willingness and openness. Like when it's, should we fly everybody from every, corner of the earth to a central location to do design work? In our world, I think we say, no, actually, we can tap into some of that remote working in addition to the face-to-face. Because where I think a lot of the remote working in the past was viewed as sort of sort of a second best, and something that people didn't have a lot of confidence and comfort with. I think these last couple of months have forced a lot of people to gain confidence, get some comfort, so when those next opportunities come along, they can be a bit more, a bit more inclusive with the strategy, saying, we can use a mix of media here, and I think that's going to be a lasting impact.
Yeah, and actually that's kind of a beautiful circular line back to where you started, in terms of that's the role of leaders, to kind of create confidence in that space to say, let's try something else. Yeah, let's try working from home. Okay, there's been lots of reasons why we can't before, whether they're valid or not, there've always been reasons. But now those reasons have become secondary. So yeah, it takes you back into that sense of kind of allowing people to give it a go and try forward. So, I mean, there's a lot of kind of big leadership aspirations and challenges in everything we've just been talking about. Can you think of anyone who you've worked with, or an organization where you feel that's been encapsulated? Because leadership role models are very, very important. That's a lot of how we learn and see and discover what we can do ourselves from seeing what other people do.
It's a great question, and one of the person that springs to mind really immediately is a fellow that I've worked with a lot at the Møller Institute, by the name of David Henderson. Dave is the CTO of Global, so the giant media and entertainment business, and he's been working with the Møller for the last 5 years, bringing teams, members of his team every year to the Institute to learn about design thinking and agile and lean startup methods, all these these tools and ways of working that can help people come up with these, more innovative solutions, right? And he's been doing it for about 5 years. And one of the things that always struck me, and one, he's about as humble and brilliant of a guy that you'll ever meet. But he's always told me, he said that and he tells the group this too, that if they are asked by him to tackle a challenge where it needs an innovative solution, where we know experimentation and risk are essential to getting somewhere new, that if there's a failure, he takes the blame. If it's a success, they get the credit. And he keeps that mantra crystal clear. And by talking to people in his team over the years too, they all know it. And they all know it's true because they've seen him consistently, really walk the talk. And the impact it's had, it's been remarkable. I mean, what they've achieved in the last 5 years since we started working with them has been incredible. I mean, I think they're over like 2 million listeners on the global player that they released over that period of time. The biggest one was probably the DAX, which is now the world's largest digital audio advertising platform. And this was something, talking to Dave, he said very clearly, he said, yeah, we wouldn't have these successes. DAX wouldn't exist as it does if we hadn't worked to build up those skills within the team and then let them do it. Let them, provide that air cover for them to go out, try out these new ways of working, put some new methods into practice, and then for him to keep reinforcing that culture so it doesn't get, gobbled up by the business as usual, which, can happen without that air cover. So Dave Henderson would definitely be my my number one case study and really living that leadership attribute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting that kind of long-term perspective as well, kind of recognizing that air cover is not simply about in the short term covering people's backs, supporting them, being there for kind of like, okay, if we make a mistake once, it's actually about setting the foundations for the future as well, and saying, right, over the next 5 years, we're going to build our capacity to do this.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good point. Is innovation, like anything else, it's not, there's no matter how great the method is, no matter what tools you're using, there's no magic wand that you wave to just make these things materialize. It is much more about, what we see consistently. It's those organizations that kind of shift the mindsets, get people confident with some different tools, new reflexes and habits. You get those things in, and then those kind of the new things do organically come out of those new ways of working. Actually, one thing Dave had said to me last time we were at the Møller together, he was just saying that, you know, since they started working with us on these training programs, that, you know, he goes, it's just commonplace now. You look at the meeting rooms, and, you know, you've got how might we questions emblazoned with, you know, different brainstorms around bringing in customers very early in the process. That's become routine. And he said, and people are comfortable coming to him with like really rough prototypes that are you know, just very, very nascent stage and still full of issues. And because they know that he's not going to go, hey, you know, what is this? You know, where's the business case? This isn't ready. Don't waste my time with this. That he knows that this is an invitation to kind of build on it, give it that feedback to help them iterate. And he said, that's just become part of the culture. And it just happens every day. And if it wasn't for all those things kind of happening organically, he said, and it was a great testimonial, he just said that there's no way we would have DAX. It would never have gotten from that initial idea to its pilot stage to now being the world's largest exchange of its type, ridiculously successful, is that if we had just stuck with our business as usual methods and sort of approach. So yeah, I think it's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, no, it is. And I think it's a sort of a good point to kind of maybe draw to close. And it strikes me that your initial thought of air cover, and always when you kind of hear that kind of thing, you think, oh, it's about risk. It's about being okay with failure. But actually, air cover, yes, it's about supporting people and allowing them to fail, but it is about providing the foundations for success. And you know, it's about being able to set a path for people to follow, set the parameters, set the space for people to act in. And failure is a part of that, but we hope more than anything else that success is the bigger part. And I think that's
absolutely. And I think, you know, failures, if you're doing it right, failure shouldn't be the project has failed and it happened quickly and we pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, you know, fast failure achieved. I mean, failure should be at that level where you are coming to someone with a rough prototype sketch and someone says, that bit isn't going to work. And then they'll tell you why. And you go, well, that's very good that I figured out that this bit isn't going to work, while I've had, you know, a sketch that took me 30 seconds to create, as opposed to 6 months down the line, a prototype that's you know, near some high fidelity, you know, near beta release kind of very expensive learning vehicle. But which of it happens all the time. So often those failures don't come until things get piloted. And piloting only happens after so much development, so much cash, so many resources, so much time. So yeah, the failures should be very quick, and it should be those, you know, those challenged assumptions that that happen really, really early. So yeah, that's doing it right.
Yeah. No, thank you, Adam. I think that's a good point to end on. And I think, you know, if anyone's interested in finding out more about how to fail well on the journey to success, then do get in touch with us and we can see how we can help you along that journey. So Adam, thanks so much for your time today. It's been great speaking with you. And yeah, look forward to anyone who's been watching this, look forward to you joining us for our next in the Leadership Insights. So thank you very much indeed. Take care.
Thank you very much for having me. Take care.